Lots of speculation in recent weeks. Does Joe Biden support court packing? You know, you could ask him, but you might actually not find out the answer. He's doubled down, him and Kamala Harris, over and over and over again. They refuse to tell the American public, and they basically admit what they're doing. Let's take a listen to what he was asked over the weekend.
Sir, I've got to ask you about packing the courts, and I know that you said yesterday you aren't going to answer the question until after the election, but this is the number one thing that I've been asked about from viewers in the past couple of days.
Well, you've been asked by the viewers who are probably Republicans who don't want me continuing to talk about what they're doing to the court right now.
Well, sir, don't the voters deserve to know?
No, they don't. I'm not going to play his game. He'd love me to talk about, and I've already said something on court pack. He'd love that to be the discussion instead of what he's doing now. He's about to make a pick in the middle of an election. First time it's ever been done. First time in history it's ever been done.
Okay, Krystal. Voters don't deserve to know where he stands on court packing. Here's the deal. Look, you support court packing? That's okay. That's a legitimate position. I think it's wrong, but go for it. And you can accept the political ramifications and the discussion for that if you would like to. But voters don't deserve to know. I mean, like, this is one of those straight up things where he basically has contempt for the entire system. And he's like, no, you don't deserve to know what I think about this. And in a political sense, I actually think it kind of makes sense, because what he's saying is whatever I say, I'll catch flack for it. You know, from the left if I don't, from the right if I do.
Yeah.
And so I'll just let it be focused on Amy Coney Barrett and the, you know, whatever's going on, and he's up, you know, so much in the election. But that doesn't mean he should get away with it.
See,
you can't do this.
I actually think the politics of it are more disastrous than whatever he might say, because anytime you, like, they just, it's kind of bold. They just actively are like, no, I'm not going to answer that question, you know? But anytime you do that, you create this little mini media frenzy around it, right? I saw somebody on Twitter pointed out the parallel to, remember when Elizabeth Warren wouldn't say the words about, like, where the money would come from for Medicare for all.
Oh, yes.
And there was that whole thing about, like, she will not say that taxes will go up, and Bernie's just like, yeah, if you're above this amount of income, taxes are going to go up.
I do remember this.
And so even though if you just did the polling on Bernie's position versus Warren's position, like the sort of wishy-washy, let me come up with some convoluted way to say it's not going to raise your taxes thing would probably poll better. But people actually preferred you just being straight up with them. And so I think that's the same thing with court packing. I am in favor of court packing. Joe Biden in the past, during the primary, was very clear about his opposition to it.
Yes.
Apparently now they want to sort of leave the door open, is what it appears to me. I don't have any confidence that he would actually go through with something that would be perceived as such a radical change, because I just see nothing in his past that indicates he would do that. He's a real institutionalist. He's even dragged his feet about being willing to end the filibuster, but I think that he's starting to get on board with. But they want to sort of leave the door open here. I really think that this would be kind of a non-story either way he answered it. If he was just basically like, no, I don't believe in that, I'm not going to do it, then I think that would end it. If he was like, yes, but asserted it very firmly, then the question is answered. And ultimately, how many people are voting based on court packing? It's like next to nobody.
It's very little. And I guess the real thing is, let's say, here's an easier answer. Let's see what happens with Amy Coney Barrett's nomination. Okay, fine, right? Like, then he's like, hey, I'm leaving the door open, given what the Republicans have done here. Again, I don't think it's a good idea. I think it would probably destroy the country. But if you want to go for it, go for it. And that's the thing is just the contempt and the strategy here is insane. And they're coming, and look, they're at least getting called out in a way that I haven't seen in a long time, which we saw over the weekend whenever one of his campaign strategists, campaign managers,
kind of
went on CNN, was like, it's unconstitutional. Well, number one, no, it's not, in order to appoint people to the courts. But two, again, just refusing outright to give a position to the American people. Let's take a listen.
But he said it's not constitutional what they're doing. How is it not constitutional what they're doing?
His point is that the people have an opportunity to weigh in on this constitutional process through their vote. And we are now in the midst of the election. Millions of people have already cast their votes. And you see that the vast majority of people say that they want the person who wins the election on November 3rd to nominate the justice.
That's a poll. That's
seat.
Not the Constitution.
So by trying to that is there's the constitutional process of advising consent. The American people get to have their say by voting for president, by voting for senators. We are now 23 days from the election.
Right, but it's not
Again,
unconstitutional.
Millions of votes. Voters are being denied their constitutional right to have a say in this process.
They elected the Senate.
Republicans are trying to ram through a nominee who, by the way, is going to change the makeup of the court. And we see time and time again, poll after poll shows that most Americans vehemently disagree with this. They believe
Kate, that's
that the vote should happen on November 3rd.
That's not what the word constitutional means. Constitutional doesn't mean I like it or I don't like it. It means it's according to the U.S. Constitution. There's nothing unconstitutional about what the U.S. Senate is doing.
Good for Jake. He's one of the few people that actually enjoys adversarial.
Yeah,
you can
really
see he gets jazzed by it. That was an important moment though, and their position is ultimately silly. But on the politics of it, I always think you lose by making yourself look like this typical politician who doesn't want to answer the question, who wants to spin the way that Kate Bedingfield does there and be let me use the word constitutional in a way that doesn't at all mean what that word is. And people that's what people get so disgusted by. It's just look, maybe I'm not going to agree with you, but just answer the question. And then from a substantive point of view, look, obviously we know the number of justices is not in the Constitution. I personally think that the court has already been destroyed in terms of a nonpartisan entity. To me, it's just a political entity at this point anyway. But what Biden and Harris, not only on this issue, but certainly on environmentalism, on the Green New Deal, on fracking, they accept this right-wing framing of when you accept the idea that I don't want to answer the question on this issue, you make it appear that the thing is a bad thing, right? Yeah. So by not answering, it becomes clear what you're signaling to the people is court packing is a bad thing. That's why he doesn't want to say anything. Whereas one of the things that Trump did very effectively in 2016 is he would just come out and say the thing that would normally be the thing that politicians would be oh, you can't say that bad thing. Bernie did it too. And people, frankly, they kind of respect it. And that's how you win people over, because if you're there's nothing to be ashamed of from this position, and let me explain why, then you can start to make the case. Whereas if you're afraid of it, if you're afraid of the Green New Deal, oh my God, or you're afraid of Medicare for all and health care for everyone, then what you're signaling to the American people is not only are Republicans are opposed to this, but also Democrats are opposed to this. So this must be a really, really bad thing that we can't even talk about.
I can see how you would see it that way. I still think it's a terrible idea. But I think that, look, I'm not going to deny that there's probably a way to make the public support it. I mean, FDR almost got the country to support it back in 1937. So I think that the approach is both a contempt for voters, a weird kind of way in which they can see political damage, but also don't want to have that damage. Overall, it just tells me that these people don't care about the actual people that are out there on the issue. And I think that that's the part that bothers me the most, which is that they're just no, I'm not going to answer it, and you're going to vote for me anyway. And look, they probably will. And that's actually the worst part, right? Which is they can have contempt for you and still take your vote because they've basically put us all in this situation. And I think that America deserves better than that. If you're going to support something, just say it. You're right. I've been thinking. I think that's exactly what it was. That dynamic from the Bernie campaign when he's yeah, I'm going to raise taxes, but you're going to have better health care. It's up to you to decide whether you want that or not.
I mean, look, Bernie didn't win the primary, but it wasn't because people didn't support Medicare for all. That was in every state poll, even the most conservative states in the Democratic primary overwhelmingly supported his position. And we saw when Kamala backed away from it, when Elizabeth Warren did her whole wishy-washy and let me come up with this complicated formula in order to not have to say I'm going to raise taxes. People saw through it and they did not like the way it smelled. It's always just better to be straightforward with people, even if your position is a little bit unpopular.
That's right.
All right, we're going to have more Rising for you after this.